On graduation night in North Alder, my father beamed under the gymnasium lights. Behind the bleachers, my stepmother whispered, "No drama," before her hand struck my face, drawing blood. 12 years later, I've returned to the family corporation as director of compliance. I carry a small metal box containing the evidence she thought was gone. Tonight, I will make the entire board of directors hear that slap again, not with sound, but through spreadsheets, signatures, and bylaws. My name is Rowan Pierce. I am 32 years old now, and the memory of my high school graduation plays back in my mind, not as a soft focus recollection, but as a series of sharp, evidentiary files. Each sound, each sensation, each tick of the clock is preserved with the cold clarity of a legal deposition. It happened at Briar Home High, in the suffocatingly small, self-important town of West Barrow, a place where everyone knew your name and, more importantly, your family's net worth. The air in the gymnasium that night was thick with the scent of cheap hairspray, wilting corsages, and the collective sweat of 500 proud parents packed into squeaking metal bleachers. It was a standard-issue ceremony, a conveyor belt of navy blue gowns and identically hopeful speeches about the future. My future, at that moment, felt bright. I was graduating third in my class, accepted into a top-tier business program on the other side of the country, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights. My father, Grant Pierce, a man whose presence filled any room he entered, pulled me into a hug. He was a major shareholder in Pierce Logistics Group, a sprawling enterprise of trucks, warehouses, and freight routes that was the economic heartbeat of our entire county. His hug was for the cameras, the dozens of parental camcorders and flashing disposables aimed our way. It was firm, proprietary, a gesture that said, "This one is mine. Look at what my investment has produced." He smelled of expensive scotch and the crisp, starched cotton of his shirt. "I'm proud of you, Rowan," he said, his voice a low baritone that carried over the din. It was a perfectly delivered line, one that made the other parents smile and nod in approval. Grant Pierce, the titan of industry, was also a devoted father. It was a good look. Standing just to his right, a fixed, brilliant smile plastered on her face, was my stepmother, Janessa. Her makeup was a work of art, an impenetrable mask of foundation, powder, an expertly applied liner that betrayed no emotion beyond serene satisfaction. She was a woman who navigated the world as if it were a boardroom, and every interaction was a negotiation. As the last of the graduates tossed their caps and the crowd began to surge from the stands towards the exit, her manicured fingers closed around my upper arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails pressing just enough to be felt through the thin polyester of my gown. "Come with me for a moment," she murmured, her voice a smooth, low hum that was lost to everyone but me. She didn't wait for a reply, simply steered me away from my father, who was already deep in conversation with a city councilman, and towards a side door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind us, the celebratory noise of the gymnasium was replaced by the high, mechanical whine of a massive ventilation fan. We were in a narrow, concrete corridor behind the gym, a space that smelled of stale popcorn, industrial cleaner, and the damp chill of cinder blocks. My back was pressed against a red fire escape door, the cold of the metal seeping through my gown. The panic bar dug into my spine. Janessa stood before me, her smile gone, replaced by a look of flat, cold appraisal. Her shadow, thrown by a single, caged bulb overhead, loomed over me. She smoothed the front of her silk blouse, a gesture of absolute composure. "We are not going to have any drama tonight," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the fan's drone. "This evening is for Kellen. It's his night to shine as valedictorian. You will not take that from him." Then came the slap. It wasn't a frantic, emotional strike. It was deliberate, controlled, and heavy. The sound was a sharp, wet crack that seemed to momentarily silence the whining fan. My head snapped to the side, my hair flying across my face. A starburst of pain erupted from my cheekbone, hot and immediate, followed by a dull, throbbing ache that radiated down to my jaw. The world tilted, the concrete floor seeming to drop away for a second. The inside of my mouth was instantly slick and warm. Her words, delivered in that same chilling whisper, were a stiletto blade in my ear. "Don't you dare take the spotlight from my son." It wasn't a warning. It was a directive stamped onto my skin. The impact felt like a seal, a brand, marking me as secondary. My vision swam back into focus. I tasted iron, automatically. My jaw clenched and I bit down hard on the inside of my lip. A desperate, instinctual act to ground myself, to convert the external shock into a pain I could control. The metallic tang intensified. I didn't cry out. I didn't move. I stared past her shoulder, up at the corner where the concrete wall met the corrugated metal overhang of the gym's roof, and I saw it, a small black dome, a security camera. A tiny, winking red light pulsed steadily in the darkness. Once every 2 seconds, a silent, impartial witness. Click, red, click, black. It was recording. The thought landed in my brain not with relief, but with a sudden, freezing clarity. An event unseen is a memory. An event recorded is evidence. 2 minutes later, 120 seconds, 60 pulses of that little red light, the fire escape door opened from the inside, bathing the corridor in the gymnasium's bright light. My father stood there, silhouetted. His eyes flickered from Janessa's placid face to mine. He saw the swelling on my cheek, the way I held my jaw. I could see the flicker of recognition, the briefest moment of concern, before it was professionally suppressed. He glanced back into the gym, then back at me. He took a small step forward, lowering his voice. "Tomorrow is a big day," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, an instruction to file away this incident under inconvenient. The launch of a new distribution hub was tomorrow. The press would be there. A swollen-faced daughter did not fit the corporate narrative. He placed a hand on Janessa's arm. "Let's go. People are waiting." In the back of their Lincoln Town car, the leather seats felt cold and slick against my skin. Janessa and my father spoke in low tones about logistics, about the mayor's speech, about quarterly projections. I said nothing. My cheek throbbed in time with the passing streetlights. I reached into the small purse hidden under my gown and pulled out my phone, a cheap, plastic flip phone with a low-resolution camera. Shielding the screen with my body, I angled it towards my face. In the dim, shifting light, I flipped it open, navigated to the camera function, and took a picture. The flash was startlingly bright in the dark car. I took another, this time of the inside of my lip, where my teeth had broken the skin. The image was blurry, poorly lit, but the smear of blood was unmistakable. I navigated to the menu, found the option to save the photos, and directed them to the tiny micro SD card nestled inside. As the car turned onto our long, tree-lined driveway, a promise took root in my mind. It was a cold, hard seed in the pit of my stomach. They operated on a currency of whispers, of social pressure, of unspoken threats and deniable actions. They relied on me to be emotional, to be hysterical, to be a daughter whose words could be dismissed as adolescent melodrama. I would not give them that satisfaction. If no one would believe my words, then I would build a case so solid, so irrefutable, that they would have no choice but to believe the proof. My words could be ignored. A chain of custody could not. That night, in my room, I powered down the flip phone and used a pair of tweezers to carefully extract the micro SD card. It was absurdly small, a tiny black square of plastic and metal, holding the digital ghost of that moment. I walked to my desk and picked up a small, brushed metal box I had bought at a stationery store weeks earlier to hold my graduation money. It was plain, functional, and secured by a 4-digit combination lock. I placed the memory card inside. Then, with deliberate, steady fingers, I spun the dials. 0, 6, 1-5, June 15th, graduation day, the day of the slap, the day the statute of limitations on my silence began. The lock clicked shut with a satisfying finality. The memory was no longer just a wound. It was now an asset, securely stored and waiting for the right market conditions to be deployed. 12 years is a long time. It's enough time to earn a degree, then another. It's enough time to build a career in the sterile, unforgiving world of corporate auditing, to become fluent in the languages of SOX, FCPA, and SEC filings. It's enough time for a memory to cease being a source of pain and to cure into a tool, sharp and perfectly weighted. 12 years later, I have returned to the orbit of my family, not as a daughter, but as a function. I am the new Director of Compliance for Pierce Logistics Group, based out of the gleaming, impersonal headquarters in Riverton, a city of steel and glass 1,000 miles from the suffocating humidity of West Barrow. The company I've returned to is not the one my father built. Janessa is now the interim chairwoman of the board. The official story, disseminated in a carefully worded press release, is that my father has taken an extended leave of absence for health-related reasons. The phrase hangs in the corporate air, vague and unassailable. To question it would be impolite. And at Pierce Logistics, politeness is a form of currency. Janessa wields it like a weapon. She sits in his 42nd floor office, the one with the panoramic view of the Riverton skyline, and steers the company he bled for. And at her side, naturally, is her son, Kellen, once the high school valedictorian, is now the VP of Growth. He secured the title on the back of his signature initiative, the Smart Warehouse Expansion Campaign. It's a project that involves massive capital expenditure on automated facilities, a move lauded in trade publications as visionary. He has his mother's smile and my father's ambition, a dangerous combination. He walks the halls with the unearned confidence of a man who has never had a door closed in his face. I was not appointed to this position. I was headhunted. My resume was too perfect to ignore. 6 years at Barrow & Tane, one of the top auditing firms in the country, where I specialized in forensic accounting for multinational corporations. I earned my Certified Compliance and Ethics Professional, CCEP, and my Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialist, CAMS, certifications. I was an asset, a credentialed professional with an impeccable track record, and of course, I was a Pierce. Hiring me was a brilliant PR move for Janessa. It projected an image of family unity and a commitment to rigorous oversight. It was a miscalculation on her part. She saw the name, but she didn't read the fine print. My first 2 weeks are an exercise in methodical observation. I am a camera, recording data points. The corporate culture here is a case study in controlled paranoia. Meeting schedules are a brutalist tapestry of back-to-back appointments, leaving no room for unsanctioned conversation. In these meetings, employees speak in a carefully curated corporate dialect. They use words like alignment, synergy, and optimization as shields, avoiding direct statements. Questions are met with deflections, and accountability is a hot potato passed around the table. The emails are even more telling. Every message, no matter how trivial, has a long tail of CC'd recipients. It's not about keeping people informed. It's about creating witnesses, spreading liability so thin that it becomes invisible. It's a culture of fear masquerading as collaboration. On my 10th day, I find my first concrete anomaly. It arrives in the form of a procurement summary report, a routine document I requested from all department heads. Buried in the third appendix is a new vendor contract that catches my eye. Northline Freight Services. The name is generic, forgettable, but the numbers are not. The procurement department has just signed a 2-year, 8-figure contract with them to handle all freight forwarding for the Midwest corridor. A quick cross-reference with our internal cost benchmarks and historical vendor pricing shows Northline's rates are, on average, 22% higher than market rate, an 18% premium on some routes, a staggering 26% on others. Such a variance should have triggered a dozen red flags. It should have been dead on arrival. I pull the digital file on the Northline contract. The approval workflow is where the story gets interesting. Pierce Logistics, like any company its size, has a multi-tiered, sequential approval process for contracts of this value. It should require sign-offs from procurement, legal, finance, and the relevant operational VP, but this one didn't. I find a digital artifact of a streamlined approval protocol that was invoked, a subroutine in the system designed for emergency, time-sensitive acquisitions. This was no emergency. It was a standard freight contract. Following that thread, I dive into the system logs for our Enterprise Resource Planning (ERP) software, the digital brain that governs everything from accounting to supply chain management. 3 months ago, a series of automated warning triggers related to vendor price deviations were disabled. The change was logged, but no justification was provided. The system was deliberately blinded. The final piece of the initial puzzle clicks into place when I review the commit history on the company's mobile device management (MDM) platform. This system controls the security and operational rules for all company-issued devices. It's the gatekeeper. The records show that the change to the ERP warning protocols, the one that allowed the Northline contract to sail through without scrutiny, was executed at 11:47 p.m. on a Saturday night. The account used was a senior IT administrator's, but the IP address of the device that initiated the change was not from his home network. It was routed through a commercial VPN service, masking its true origin. The commit itself was sloppy, rushed. It was the work of someone with high-level access, but a poor understanding of operational security. It was the digital equivalent of a brick thrown through a window. My third Monday at the company is the quarterly all-hands meeting, held in the cavernous auditorium on the ground floor. Janessa is on stage, a picture of poised authority in a tailored navy dress. She speaks about growth, about vision, about the Pierce legacy of integrity. Kellen speaks after her, his presentation full of sleek graphics and buzzwords about his smart warehouses. He gets a round of enthusiastic applause. Then, Janessa steps back to the microphone. Before we conclude, I'd like to formally introduce a new member of our executive team, she says, her voice echoing slightly in the large room. Her eyes find me in the front row. Some of you may already know her. My stepdaughter, Rowan Pierce, has joined us as our new Director of Compliance. A polite, muted applause ripples through the auditorium. All eyes are on me. I feel the weight of their collective gaze, the curiosity, the speculation. Rowan comes to us with an extraordinary background in corporate governance and auditing. Janessa continues, her smile never wavering. She is going to be an invaluable asset in ensuring that as we grow, we do so with the utmost integrity. She pauses, letting the words sink in. Rowan is going to help us become more compliant than ever before. I stand, nod to the crowd, and return her smile with one of my own. It's a carefully practiced expression, one I perfected during years of client-facing meetings. It is professional, pleasant, and utterly devoid of emotion. I look directly at her. This woman who now runs my father's company, who slapped me in the dark and now praises me in the light. And as the applause fades, a single thought crystallizes in my mind, as clear and sharp as the day I locked it away in a metal box. Compliant with the law, I think, not with you. That night, I go not to my father's house, but to my own sterile, high-rise apartment overlooking the Riverton Industrial Basin. I bypass the modern, encrypted hard drives on my desk and walk to the back of my closet, to a simple personal safe. Inside is the brushed metal box, cool to the touch. The combination is muscle memory, 0615. The lock clicks open. It's not a time capsule, it's a case file. The contents are sparse. The micro SD card, no bigger than a fingernail, sits in a small plastic sheath. A faded, thermal paper receipt from a 24-hour pharmacy in West Barrow, dated June 15, 2013, 10:15 p.m. The items listed are ibuprofen and a box of sterile gauze pads. Tucked beneath it is one of those gauze pads, stiff and brown with my own dried blood, carefully preserved in a small, zip-locked evidence bag. This is not memory. This is inventory. The next morning, I don't go to the office. I go to a digital forensics lab in a nondescript building downtown, a place that advertises e-discovery and litigation support. I don't just hand over the card. I request a formal chain of custody intake. The technician, a man with tired eyes who has clearly seen everything, nods, understanding the protocol. I fill out the paperwork. He takes the card and places it in a sealed anti-static bag, which he then signs and dates. I pay for the service and for the added fee of having the entire data extraction process video recorded. I am not recovering memories. I am authenticating evidence. The report comes back 2 days later on an encrypted drive. The news is as expected. The two image files, IMG0 JPG and IMG02 JPG, are low resolution, full of digital noise. As the lab report confirms, the 2013-era flip phone embedded no EXIF data, no camera model, no GPS, no aperture settings. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the card's file allocation table. The system timestamp, baked into the card's own directory structure, reads 2013 to 6/15, 2230/15, and 2013 to 06/15, 2230/48. The digital footprint is intact, placing the creation of the photos squarely on the night of my graduation. Now for the second piece. I draft a formal request on my new Pierce Logistics letterhead, not as a daughter, but as the Director of Compliance. The letter is addressed to the Superintendent of the Briar Home School District. I cite a fictionalized, but plausible, Riverton County Public Records Act, which I claim has reciprocal jurisdiction with West Barrow under state educational governance statutes. It's a bluff, but a legally dense one. My request is for all security system logs, maintenance records, and archived video data for the Briar Home High Gymnasium, exterior and interior, for the period of June 1st, 2013 to June 30th, 2013. I justify it as part of a retrospective security protocol audit for a Pierce Logistics corporate-sponsored educational grant. It sounds boring, official, and expensive to fight. A week later, I receive a reply. The district's overworked IT manager informs me that all digital security logs from that period were purged in a system upgrade in 2018. It's the answer I expected, but he forwards my request to the school librarian, who manages the physical archives. The librarian, a woman named Ms. Albright, replies 2 days after that. "I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for," she writes. But our previous AV technician was a basketball fanatic. He kept a private archive of the 2013 state qualifier tournament, which was held in our gym that June. He appears to have backed up the entire month of security footage from the gym's main server onto VHS tapes, just to ensure he didn't miss capturing any angles of the tournament games. I have a box of tapes labeled Gym Archive June 2013. I arrange for a bonded courier service to retrieve the entire box. Citing the sensitivity of the corporate grant audit, the chain of custody is maintained. I have the relevant tape, June 14-16, 2013, professionally digitized by the same forensics lab that handled the microSD card. That evening, I watch the file. It's grainy, black and white, shot from the exact high-angle dome I remember. A timestamp in the corner reads, June 15, 2013. I fast forward. The ceremony ends. The timestamp reads 21:32 out. The crowd begins to move. Then, at 21:32:18, two figures walk from the main gym doors toward the fire escape. The resolution is terrible. Faces are just pale smudges, but the figures are distinct. One is tall, wearing the flowing graduation gown. Me. The other is shorter, more solid, and their hair is unmistakably pinned up in the tight, elegant chignon Janessa wore that night, and every night. The video shows the figure with the updo grabbing the arm of the taller figure and pulling her out of the frame, into the dark corridor beneath the camera's blind spot. They disappear. The empty frame holds for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Then, the figures reappear. walking back into the gym separately. The clip is 30 seconds of movement and 3 minutes of stillness. It is conclusive. But proximity is not action. I need to place the camera and the injury in the same indisputable timeline. I file a public records request with the West Barrow Municipal Archives for the building permits and blueprints for the Briar Home Gym renovation of 2005. The files, now digitized as PDFs, are emailed to me within an hour. I find the security system schematic. Camera 04, a Panasonic Dove CW860A dome, is marked on the blueprint. Its position: rear canopy, overseeing fire exit 3B. Its field of vision, a cone-shaped shaded area on the schematic, ends precisely at the threshold of the fire door. The tape shows exactly what the blueprint says it should. Finally, I access my own medical history through a secure online portal. I download the PDF of my visit to a West Barrow urgent care clinic on June 16, 2013, the morning after. I had told my father I was going to a friend's house and took a taxi. The intake form notes my complaint: pain and swelling in jaw, difficulty chewing. The physician's report, signed by a Dr. L. Marden, is clinically brief. Patient presents with significant contusion on left zygomatic arch. Examination of interior reveals 1.5 laceration of the buccal mucosa, consistent with direct, blunt force impact. No fractures detected. I open a new, encrypted spreadsheet on my laptop. I am not writing a diary. I am building an exhibit list. Exhibit A, BKVHS Digital 00110 MP4, timestamp 21/32/18, shows Figure 1, Rowan, and Figure 2, Janessa, entering the fire exit corridor. Exhibit B, Farm Receipt 001.pdf, timestamp 22/1500, purchase of gauze and ibuprofen. Exhibit C, SD card, IMG 001.jpg, file timestamp 22/30/15, photo of facial injury. Exhibit D, taxi receipt 001.pdf, timestamp 21/55/02. I had found the receipt in the box. 2. Proves I left the premises alone. Exhibit E, Med Report, Marden 001.pdf, timestamp 09/45/02, June 16, 2013, medical diagnosis of blunt force impact. Exhibit F, Gym Blueprint Sec. Confirms camera angle and blind spot. I stare at the completed timeline. It is a cold, hard, logical progression. Graduation ends. 2 figures go to a blind spot. 1 figure immediately leaves the premises by taxi, goes to a pharmacy to buy medical supplies for a facial injury, and photographs that injury. The next morning, a doctor formally diagnoses an injury consistent with a high-impact strike. Janessa's voice is nowhere in the file. The slap itself makes no sound, but the evidence forms a perfect, silent scream. The pieces don't need a voice. They just need to align, and they do. The file on my graduation night is now sealed and stored. It is my personal insurance. It is the why. Now, I return to the how. My compliance investigation into Pierce Logistics Group begins where the evidence is loudest: the Northline Freight Services contract. My office is a glass box on the 30th floor, 2 levels below the executive suite. It is quiet, and the data flows directly to my terminal. I am not building a case for a court of law. Not yet. I am building a memo for a board of directors, a document so clinically precise it will leave no room for interpretation. I begin with the contract's core financial terms. I extract the rate schedules for all 22 designated freight routes and load them into a comparative analysis spreadsheet. Against this, I load 2 data sets: Pierce Logistics' own historical freight costs for the same routes over the preceding 36 months, and the industry standard benchmark, the Riverton Freight Index, for the current quarter. The resulting chart is not a subtle discrepancy. It is a bloodbath in red ink. I isolate the variances. The high-traffic Mid-Lake route, Northline is charging 18% above our established baseline, the West Sector automated hub route. Kellen's flagship project. The premium is 26.4%. These are not figures that can be explained by fuel surcharges or market fluctuations. This is not a negotiation. It is a heist. The total projected overpayment, assuming standard volume, exceeds $40 million annually. Next, I examine the approval itself. The streamlined approval protocol required only one executive signature instead of the standard 4. The signature on the digital document belongs to our acting chief financial officer, Mark Donovan. Donovan is a nervous, meticulous man, a holdover from my father's tenure, unlikely to approve such a variance. I inspect the metadata of the digital signature. The cryptographic certificate is valid, but the source IP address is not. The signature was executed from an IP that geolocates to a residential internet provider in Scottsdale, Arizona. I pulled Donovan's corporate calendar and travel logs for that date. He was in Riverton, delivering the keynote speech at our quarterly finance town hall. His credentials were used, but not by him. A $40 million leak needs a pipe. I find it in Addendum C, Subcontractor and Ancillary Services. Buried among legitimate fuel suppliers and maintenance yards is a company I've never heard of, J&K Meridian. Their role is listed as Logistical Optimization and Routing Consultation, a service for which they are paid a 3% flat fee on the contract's total value. This is the siphon. I run a full corporate entity search on J&K Meridian. It barely exists. It was incorporated 3 months ago, just weeks before the Northline RFP process began. Its official address is a PEO box at a commercial mail drop in Gray County, a jurisdiction notorious for its corporate secrecy laws. The registered agent is a generic incorporation service. There are no officers listed, no parent company. J&K Meridian is a ghost, a legal fiction created for the sole purpose of receiving money. Now I must link the ghost to the machine. I pivot to internal compliance. Who in procurement signed off on a contract with a P&O box vendor? The file lead is Sam Kaplan, our director of procurement. I pull his corporate expense reports and gift declarations for the past 6 months. He's a mid-level executive, and his reports are unremarkable, until I cross-reference his calendar with the J&K incorporation date. In the exact week the Northline contract was signed, Kaplan filed an expense report for a trip to Miami. The purpose? J&K Meridian Advanced Logistics Training Seminar. He was reimbursed for the flight, but the hotel and conference fees were listed as comped by vendor. This is a catastrophic breach of Pierce Logistics Policy 4.01a, which strictly prohibits accepting travel or lodging from any vendor, particularly one in an active bidding process. Kaplan didn't just approve the contract, he was bribed to do it. Kaplan is a pawn. He would never have the authority or the nerve to orchestrate this alone. He had to have top cover. The primary beneficiary of this contract is the Growth Division, run by Kellen. I search the email archives. Kellen's corporate account is pristine. He uses encrypted messaging apps for anything sensitive, but he is arrogant. I run a search not for Northline or J&K, but for Port Quarry, the absurdly expensive restaurant where corporate royalty cuts its darkest deals. I find it, an email from Kellen's corporate account to an untraceable, private domain. The subject, finalizing. The body, Port Quarry, 8 p.m., Tuesday, use the private room. This was sent the night before the Northline bidding window officially closed. Kellen, the VP of Growth, was holding a secret, off-books meeting with the architects of the fraudulent contract. But the most critical piece of evidence is digital, not financial. It's the ERP system change, the one that disabled the pricing variance alarms 3 months ago, the act of sabotage. I pull the physical access logs from our security database for the 42nd executive floor, focusing on the Saturday night the change was made. The corporate calendars for both Janessa and Kellen show them as off-site for the entire weekend, but the badge logs, which record every key card swipe, tell the truth. At 11:02 p.m. that Saturday, A card assigned to Kellen Pierce was used to access the 42nd floor elevator bank. At 11:03 p.m., it badged into the main executive suite. The logs show him leaving at 11:58 p.m. He was physically in the building, on the executive floor, during the precise window of the sabotage. His presence is damning, but it's not the final link. Kellen doesn't have the IT credentials to make that change. I traced the help desk ticket that authorized the emergency change. The ticket was submitted at 11:15 p.m., citing a critical routing table error that required an immediate patch. The perfect cover. I pull the metadata from the ticket submission. It wasn't submitted from an IT terminal or from Kellen's laptop. The asset tag for the device that submitted the request, the one that formally authorized the IT admin to bypass the safeguards, belongs to one laptop, the one issued to Janessa Pierce, chairwoman of the board. There it is, the complete chain. Janessa provided the authorization from her device. Kellen was the physical presence in the office to oversee the act. Together, they disabled the alarms. Then, they pushed through a fraudulent contract via a bribed employee, Kaplan, to a shell company, J&K, that benefits Kellen's growth initiative, siphoning $40 million a year from their own company, from my father's company. I work through the night. I do not write a story. I compile a report. It is dry, factual, and 52 pages long. To David Lynn, General Counsel. From Rowan Pierce, Director of Compliance. The subject line is precise. Privileged and confidential. Attorney-client communication. Preliminary findings. Vendor contract. 88 to 1A. Northline Services. I attach the appendices, each a numbered exhibit. The rate variance analysis. The IP geolocation report for Donovan's signature. The J&K corporate filings. Kaplan's falsified expense report. The Port Quarry email. The 42nd floor badge logs. The IT ticket metadata. I convert the document to a PDF, lock it, and apply a unique, time-stamped digital watermark to every page. My watermark. I write a one-sentence email. David, please review the attached at your earliest convenience. I am requesting this communication be designated as privileged and confidential, pending further legal review. I hit send. The internal clock has started. I am not finished. I trust David Lynn to be a good lawyer, which means I cannot trust him to be an ally. His first duty is to the corporation, and Janessa currently is the corporation. I need an external failsafe. I open a separate, isolated browser, route my connection through a series of anonymous relays, and navigate to the online portal for the fictional State Transportation Oversight Commission, the regulatory body with jurisdiction over Pierce Logistics. I find their anonymous whistleblower submission form. I create a new, disposable email address. I upload a simplified version of my report, one focused purely on the financial fraud, the price fixing, and the shell company, stripped of the internal data linking it directly to Janessa and Kellen. I am not giving them my whole case, only enough to light the fire. I submit the complaint. A case number flashes on the screen. Stock UE 2C25 0914. The external clock is now also ticking. The memo to General Counsel was a depth charge. I had dropped it into the silent, dark waters of the 42nd floor 3 days ago. I'd received no reply, not even a received. The silence was heavy, pressurized. Then, the email. It arrived in my inbox at 8:01 a.m. Subject: mandatory. All hands. Reaffirming our culture. It was called by Janessa, scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. in the main conference center. It was a transparently defensive move. A culture meeting is what leaders call when they smell blood in the water and want to find the shark. She knew someone was digging. She just didn't know the threat was already inside the perimeter, wearing a company badge and a polite smile. I arrived at the conference center 5 minutes early, a cavernous room on the 10th floor, already filling with nervous middle managers. I chose a seat in the back row, near the exit, a tactician's position. I set my laptop on the small collapsible table. In my right hand, I held a pen. It was a Lamy 2000, brushed stainless steel, heavy, and professional. It looked like the pen of a serious person. I clicked the top. A tiny, almost invisible blue LED near the clip flashed once, then immediately went dark. The high-fidelity microphone was active. The state of Riverton, in this fictionalized America, is a one-party consent jurisdiction. As a willing participant in this corporate meeting, I was that one party. The audio file was being recorded directly to the 64-gigabyte drive hidden inside. Janessa took the stage, a vision of composed authority in a cream-colored dress. She radiated calm. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Her voice modulated, warm, maternal. In a time of such rapid growth and exciting new ventures, it's easy to lose sight of what makes Pierce Logistics special. It's not our trucks. It's not our software. It's our people. She smiled, a practiced, encompassing smile that felt like an air conditioner kicking on. And the foundation of our people is loyalty. Loyalty to this family. Loyalty to our shared mission. We are a family, and we must protect our family from anyone who would seek to undermine it. It was a threat, beautifully packaged as a mission statement. It was aimed at the anonymous whistleblower she suspected, the one who had just filed a report with the state regulators. She was trying to smoke me out. She then yielded the floor to her son. Kellen bounced onto the stage, all youthful energy and expensive tailoring. He was her VP of Growth, the visionary. He spoke about his smart warehouse initiative, and then, inevitably, he brought up his crown jewel. "I know there's been chatter about the new partnerships," he said, affecting a tone of breezy confidence. "The Northline freight deal is historic. It's a complex, multi-layered strategy that secures our dominance for the next 50 years. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. "It's a very, very complex deal. My advice?" He leaned into the microphone. "Don't get lost in the weeds. Trust the vision. Trust the leadership. Don't ask too many deep questions. Just enjoy the ride." A Q&A session began. The first few questions were softballs, clearly planted, about vacation policies and the new logo. Then, I raised my hand. The room was large. Heads turned. I was the new director of compliance. I was also the ghost from the family's past. Janessa, back at the podium, spotted me. Her smile didn't waver. "Yes, Rowan, our new director of compliance. I'm so glad you're here. A perfect person to ask about our culture." I stood. I didn't wait for the runner to bring me a microphone. I projected my voice, the way I was trained for auditor debriefs, clear, cold, and devoid of emotion. "Thank you, Janessa. Kellen, a question on the Northline deal you just mentioned." In the front row, Kellen's smile tightened at the hinges. "In reviewing the vendor onboarding files as part of my initial audit," I continued, my voice cutting through the room's ambient hum, "I noted the contract utilizes a key subcontractor, J&K Meridian, for routing consultation. I also noted the finalized rate for the high-volume Midlake route is 18% above our internal benchmarks, while the Northline deal was approved under an emergency protocol." The room went utterly silent. The air crackled. This was not a culture question. This was an accusation. "Could you elaborate on the specific value J&K Meridian brings to justify that premium?" I asked, "and how that contract aligns with our new cultural focus on fiscal responsibility?" I had just pulled the pin on a grenade and rolled it onto the stage. Kellen looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His mouth opened, closed, and he looked instinctively to his mother. Janessa was magnificent. She didn't flinch. She stepped forward smoothly, placing a calming hand on the podium, her smile fixed, almost pitying. "Rowan, thank you for such a detailed question." Her voice was light, chiding. "That is exactly the kind of granular oversight we hired you for. Truly." She paused, letting the room absorb her magnanimity. "But this forum," she gestured expansively, "is for our high-level cultural strategy. Let's not get lost in the weeds, as Kellen so rightly said." She looked directly at me. "Why don't you and I schedule a dedicated time to review those contracts? My office? Tomorrow?" She had deflected. She had reestablished control. She had belittled me and postponed the execution, all in one breath. But as she said it, I watched her left hand, the one resting on the dark wood of the podium. Her fingers, adorned with a heavy square-cut diamond, tap the wood. It wasn't a nervous tick. It was controlled, rhythmic. Tap, 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 tap. 4 distinct, precise beats, the same 4-beat rhythm she used to tap on her desk when she was furious. It was a signal of her rage, a private message she thought only she understood. Message received. She immediately called on someone from accounting, who asked a fawning question about quarterly bonuses. The subject was changed, the tension broke, but the grenade was still on the floor. Pin out. The meeting dissolved. People filed out quickly, pointedly avoiding eye contact with me. I was packing my laptop when a figure stopped at my table. It was Sarah Jenkins, the head of human resources, a 20-year veteran of the company who had started as my father's executive assistant. She was a woman who survived by being invisible. She leaned down, pretending to look for something in her bag on the floor. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice strained, not looking at me. That was brave, and it was stupid. "I'm just doing my job, Sarah." "No," she hissed, still fumbling with her bag. You're starting a war you don't understand." She stood up, and as she did, she pressed a folded yellow sticky note into my hand, concealing the movement with her file binder. "If you're really doing your job, look here, and don't ever speak to me again." She was gone, lost in the exiting crowd. I looked down at my palm. Her handwriting was a shaky, panicked scrawl. 2 words. Basement data. The sub-level archive. It's where the physical records were sent to die. Old HR files, expired contracts, insurance policies, everything from before the big digital migration. It was a tomb. I went straight to the facilities management office in the building's lobby. I didn't hesitate. I used my authority. "Rowan Pierce, Director of Compliance. I'm conducting a review of our document retention policy, specifically for executive insurance and benefits files pre-2015. The facilities manager, a man who clearly just wanted to get to his lunch break, grunted. "It's all dust down there. We're scheduled to shred that section next quarter." All the more reason for a physical spot check. I need the key to the archive cage. He checked my badge against his clearance list. Director of Compliance. I had level 1 access. He sighed, annoyed, and turned to a large metal lockbox on the wall. He pulled out a heavy, old-fashioned key attached to a red plastic tag. "Sign the log." I signed my name, R. Pierce, 11:32 a.m., Archive Cage, 1. I took the key. The basement was cold, and the air was still, thick with the smell of old paper, mildew, and dust. A single row of fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows between the towering metal shelves. This was a graveyard of corporate history. The shelves were packed 10 feet high with bankers' boxes, their labels faded. I found the section marked Executive and Legal, 2005-2015. I started pulling boxes. Compensation, 2010 to 2014. Board minutes, 2008 to 2012. Vendor contracts, inactive. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Sarah's note was a shot in the dark. After an hour, my hands gray with dust, in a box labeled Benefits, Executive, Inactive. I found it. It wasn't a standard file. It was a thick, leather-bound portfolio. The cover, embossed in gold leaf, read, Pierce Logistics Group, Key Person Policy. I opened it. The insured was Grant Pierce, my father. I flipped past the actuarial tables and the multi-million-dollar death benefit. I wasn't interested in his death. I was interested in his life. I found the section, Living Benefits and Disability Clause. My eyes scanned the dense, legal text. The beneficiary of the policy, the recipient of the full 8-figure payout, was not the company itself. It was the Pierce Family Trust. I knew that trust. Janessa had established it 5 years ago. She was the sole trustee. My fingers were cold. I read the activation clause. The policy would pay out its full, staggering benefit not just on death, but upon the insured, my father, being declared permanently incapacitated and unable to resume executive duties. My breath caught. I hunted for the trigger. How was incapacitated defined? I found the subclause. 4A. Incapacity shall be determined by the written, concurring opinion of two medical doctors, both of whom must be licensed in the state of Riverton and be designated by the company's board of directors. A chill, sharper than the basement air, ran down my spine. The board of directors, the board that Janessa now controlled as interim chairwoman. My father's health-related leave wasn't a crisis she had to manage. It was an objective she had to achieve. It was the prerequisite. The fraud, the Northline contract, the shell company, that wasn't the endgame. That was just how she was financing the coup, how she was rewarding her co-conspirators. The real target was never just the company's money. It was my father's chair, his power, his life. I closed the binder. The heavy thud echoed in the silent, dead air. My investigation had just changed. The question was no longer if Janessa was committing fraud. The question was, when exactly did my father's illness begin, and who were the two doctors who signed him away? Halverton Pines is not a hospital. It is a luxury long-term care residence, which is a $20 a word way of saying it's a place the wealthy send their inconvenient relatives to fade away quietly. The lobby smells of lemon polish and lilacs, a chemical scent designed to mask the underlying odor of antiseptic and despair. The carpets are plush, the art on the walls is generic and calming, and the staff all speak in hushed, therapeutic tones. I am here not as the director of compliance, but as a daughter. It's a role that feels ill-fitting, like a suit I haven't worn in years. I find him in the solarium, a glass-walled room at the end of a long, silent corridor. He is sitting in a wheelchair, facing a perfectly manicured garden he cannot touch. He's thinner than I remember. The powerful frame that once filled boardrooms, now shrunken beneath a cashmere blanket. He is staring at a bird bath. When I approach, he turns his head slowly. His eyes, once sharp and assessing, the eyes that could dissect a balance sheet from 20 feet away, are clouded. They look at me, but they don't seem to see me. There is a fog between us. "Dad?" I say. My voice sounds alien in the quiet room. "It's Rowan." He blinks, a slow, languid motion. There is a flicker of something. Recognition. Confusion. A ghost of an emotion. But it's gone as quickly as it appears. He turns his gaze back to the garden. That's all I get. A blink. I have already laid the groundwork. As his daughter, I have a legal right to his medical records. My formal request, submitted 2 days prior, was processed without issue. I go to the nurse's station, a brightly lit hub of quiet efficiency. A nurse hands me a thick manila folder. His name, Grant Pierce, is typed neatly on the label. I take the file to a small, empty sitting area down the hall. I don't need to read the whole thing. I know what I'm looking for. I find the admitting physician's report. The diagnosis is stated in cold clinical type: mild cognitive impairment with early onset vascular dementia. It's a diagnosis that sounds definitive, a death sentence for a man whose mind was his kingdom. Then I see the signature at the bottom of the page. Dr. Alistair Finch. The name sets off an alarm. I pull out my phone and access the encrypted file I'd pulled from the basement archive. The key person insurance policy. I run a search for the name. There it is, on page 17, in the list of consultants who helped establish the Pierce Family Trust 5 years ago. Dr. Alistair Finch, geriatric neurology consultant. One of the 2 doctors required to sign my father away was the same doctor who helped Janessa set up the financial vehicle to receive the payout. He wasn't a doctor, he was an architect. I turn the page in the medical file. My fingers cold. I find his medication chart. There is the standard list of prescriptions for a man his age. Blood pressure, cholesterol. But then I see a newer entry, added 3 months ago. Lorazepam, 0.5 ml, as needed for anxiety. It's a benzodiazepine, a powerful sedative. In elderly patients, it's known to cause confusion, memory loss, and lethargy, symptoms that perfectly mimic the cognitive decline he was supposedly suffering from. I look at the start date for the prescription. It was ordered for short-term use. The date was 1 week before the emergency board meeting where Janessa presented the letter from Dr. Finch and his colleague, declaring my father mentally unfit to continue his duties. They didn't just find a diagnosis. They manufactured the symptoms to match it. They drugged him into submission. My next step is legal. I need a copy of my father's most recent medical power of attorney, I tell the head nurse, for my records. It's a standard request. 20 minutes later, she returns with a photocopy. It's a simple, 2-page document, signed 6 months ago, transferring all medical decision-making authority from my father to one person, Janessa. I look at my father's signature. I have seen his signature thousands of times, on birthday cards, on business contracts, on report cards. It was always a decisive slash of ink, the G and P sharp and angular, with a distinctive, abbreviated flourish at the end of the E. The signature on this document is different. It is frail, wavering. The letters are rounded, uncertain, and the final, characteristic flourish is missing. It is the signature of a man whose hand is not his own, a man sedated and confused, a man being led. That evening, I return during the shift change. The daytime staff is gone, replaced by the quiet, less harried night crew. I find a nurse in the staff room, an older woman with kind, tired eyes. Her name tag reads, Maria. I introduce myself, and we make small talk about the facility. I don't accuse, I inquire. My father seems so foggy, I say, my voice laced with practiced concern. I'm worried about his medication. I know Janessa, Mrs. Pierce, is very particular about his care. Maria's expression tightens, just for a second. Mrs. Pierce is very involved, she says, her tone neutral. She must visit all the time, I press gently. She prefers to come during quiet hours, Maria says, her eyes flicking toward the hallway. After 9, she says it's less disruptive for him. She lowers her voice. She's asked us to limit other visitors during that time, says it overstimulates him. She is building a wall around him, isolating him, controlling the flow of information in and out. That must be difficult for you, I say, my voice full of sympathy. Balancing the family's wishes with his needs, I pause, then I take the risk. I'm worried he's not being heard. I'm worried his voice is being taken away. Something in her face softens. She looks at me, really looks at me, and sees more than just another wealthy daughter. She sees the truth of my words. I take out my phone and place it on the table between us. I don't activate the pen. This needs to be knowing. Maria, my father is a victim. I am building a case to protect him. Anything you can tell me would be kept confidential, used only to secure his well-being. With your permission, I'd like to record our conversation. She hesitates for a long moment, the hum of the vending machine filling the silence. Then, she gives a slow, deliberate nod. Okay. I press record. I state the date, the time, my name, and hers. I ask her to state her badge number for the record. She does. Then I ask her again about Janessa's instructions. She recounts the quiet hours policy, the restrictions on visitation, the way Janessa would often meet with Dr. Finch in my father's room, with the door closed. Her testimony is calm, factual, and devastating. Before I leave, I go back to the solarium. My father is still there, the evening light casting long shadows across the room. I pull a chair up beside him. The metal box from my closet is in my handbag. Dad, I say again, my voice low. I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. He doesn't turn. I search for a word, a key to unlock whatever is left of him. I think back to that night, to the cold metal of the fire escape door, to the promise I made myself. I remember graduation night, I whisper. His head jerks, a small, convulsive movement. His eyes, still fixed on the garden, begin to blink, rapidly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It's a frantic signal. A burst of Morse code from a sinking ship. His right hand, which has been lying limp on the cashmere blanket, begins to tremble. It lifts an inch, his fingers twitching in the air, searching for something that isn't there. He is trying to type. He is trying to input a code. My heart is hammering against my ribs. My breath catches in my throat. I reach into my bag and take out the small, brushed metal box. It feels heavy, a concentration of history and intent. I place it on his lap, over his restless hand. His fingers stop twitching. He lowers his hand. His palm flattens against the cool metal lid. Then, slowly, deliberately, he arranges his fingers, 4 of them, resting on the top of the box, right over the combination dials. It's not a random placement. It's a gesture of ownership, of recognition. This object, this vessel of my pain and my proof, is something he understands. He knows what it represents. In that moment, the entire calculus of my mission shifts. A wave of cold, clarifying rage washes over me, sweeping away the last 12 years of carefully nurtured personal grievance. This was never just about a slap. The slap was just the prologue, the first overt act in a long, methodical campaign to erase him. Janessa didn't just want his company. She wanted his voice, his will, his very identity. She was stealing his life, piece by piece, while he was still living it. I look at his hand resting on the box, the last ember of his defiance, and I understand, to save him, I have to utterly destroy the woman who put him in this chair. My plan is no longer about settling a score for the girl with the bloody lip. It is now a rescue operation. My name is Rowan Pierce, and I am here to reclaim a stolen voice. Vengeance is a chaotic and emotional pursuit. A rescue is a matter of logistics. I left Halverton Pines with the cold clarity of a project manager. My father's hand on that metal box was not a plea for retribution. It was a transfer of executive authority. The objective was no longer to make Janessa pay for the past. It was to surgically remove her from the present. My plan solidified into a 3-tiered, simultaneous assault, designed to dismantle her power structure from the inside out. The tiers were legal, financial, and reputational. Each would be executed by a separate team, with me as the central command. The countdown began on Monday morning. Tier 1, the legal front. My first action was to hire an external law firm. I could not rely on our in-house general counsel, David Lynn, who had remained silent for 5 days, a silence that signaled his allegiance to the current power structure. I chose the firm of Adler, Choi and Fisk, a boutique litigation firm known for its pit bull partners who specialized in hostile corporate takeovers and shareholder derivative suits. I met with Eleanor Vance, a senior partner with silver hair and eyes like polished granite. I did not present myself as a grieving daughter. I presented myself as a corporate officer with a fiduciary duty to investigate a potential breach. "We have a compromised board," I told her, sliding a binder across her mahogany desk, "and a medically incapacitated majority shareholder whose legal guardian is the primary subject of the investigation." The engagement letter was signed within the hour. Adler. Choi and Fisk's scope was precise. File an emergency ex parte motion in Riverton Probate Court for the immediate appointment of a temporary independent guardian for Grant Pierce. Our petition would not be based on emotion. It would be an exhibit-driven argument. Exhibit A, the key person insurance policy, naming the Janessa-controlled trust as the beneficiary upon a declaration of incapacity. Exhibit B, documentation of Dr. Alistair Finch's prior paid consultation work for that same trust, establishing a clear and disqualifying conflict of interest. Exhibit C, my father's medication chart from Halverton Pines, highlighting the introduction of lorazepam 1 week before the board vote that removed him. We attached expert testimony from a geriatric pharmacologist on the drug's known side effects. Exhibit D, the audio file of Nurse Maria's testimony, transcribed and notarized. Exhibit E, a high-resolution scan of the medical power of attorney, alongside 5 known, authenticated samples of my father's signature from the same time period. A forensic handwriting analyst's preliminary report was attached, noting significant tremor and deviation from established patterns, consistent with signature under duress or compromised motor function. The petition was filed under seal. The court date was set for 10 days from now. The legal clock was ticking. Tier 2. The financial front. With the legal action underway, I escalated the internal financial investigation. I bypassed David Lynn entirely. I sent a new, more comprehensive version of the Northline report directly to the personal email of Martha Wellesley, the 75-year-old chair of the board's audit committee. Martha was a corporate hawk from the old school, a woman who viewed unaudited expenses as a personal insult. My report was no longer a preliminary finding. It was a formal notice of material breach. Simultaneously, I leveraged my authority as Director of Compliance to trigger a surprise Level 1 vendor audit on Northline Freight Services. I sent them a formal, legally binding notice, giving them 48 hours to provide unredacted access to their complete supply chain data for the Pierce Logistics contract. The request was a weapon, designed to be impossible to fulfill. I demanded GPS tracking logs for every truck on the Mid-Lake route. I demanded chain of custody documentation for all routing consultation services provided by their subcontractor, J&K Meridian. It was a formal request for proof of a service that was never rendered. The demand was a depth charge, intended to send a shockwave of panic from Northline's management directly to their benefactors on the 42nd floor. Tier 3. The reputational front. This was the public-facing element, the battle for hearts and minds. The annual shareholder meeting was just 3 weeks away. This was Janessa's planned coronation. The moment she would transition from interim to permanent chairwoman, I intended to turn it into her public execution. My presentation, ostensibly a dry review of new compliance initiatives, was being retooled. Its new theme: radical transparency, safeguarding shareholder value through verifiable integrity. To build momentum, I organized a series of voluntary compliance town halls for employees, with an anonymous, third-party hosted hotline for submitting questions and concerns. It was a corporate-sanctioned channel for dissent, a way to gather an army of whispers. The first town hall was scheduled for the following week. With the three fronts advancing, I spent my nights digging deeper, reinforcing my positions. The silence from the 42nd floor was unnerving. Janessa was not a woman who waited to be attacked. She counterattacked. I needed more ammunition, evidence so overwhelming it would render any counter-move futile. I commissioned the IT department's deep storage team to perform a full data restoration from our off-site cold storage servers, the final resting place for deleted files. It was a costly, time-consuming process. On the 4th day of the search, they found it. A single Excel file, deleted from Kellen's laptop 5 months ago, but captured in a system backup. The file was named Gala Port Query, XLSX. It was not a spreadsheet, it was a ledger. It detailed every gift and donation associated with the Port Quarry Charity Gala, the event that had served as the networking hub for the Northline deal. There was Sam Kaplan, Director of Procurement, listed next to a platinum donation package valued at $50,000, which included a week-long stay at a resort in St. Bart's. The vendor was listed as J&K Meridian. It was a bribe, logged as a charitable contribution. The file was a detailed roadmap of their conspiracy. That night, fueled by the discovery, I revisited the security footage from the 42nd floor on the Saturday night the ERP system was sabotaged. The original footage was grainy, a high-angle shot of the executive suite entrance. Kellen's keycard had granted access, but the video showed a second figure following him in, a person whose face was obscured by shadow. I sent the clip to the same digital forensics lab I'd used before, asking them to run an enhancement and stabilization algorithm. The result came back the next day. The figure was still mostly shadow, but the enhancement sharpened one small detail. As the person moved under a recessed ceiling light, there was a bright, distinct glint of yellow gold from their wrist. It wasn't a watch. It was a thick, cuffed bracelet. I knew that bracelet. It was Janessa's signature piece, a custom gold cuff she wore to every major corporate event. I cross-referenced the video with dozens of press photos. The shape, the thickness, the way it caught the light. It was a perfect match. She wasn't just the authorizer, she was physically present for the crime. One final piece nagged at me. The blurry video from graduation night, the figure with the chignon hairstyle. It was her. I knew it, but I needed to anchor that grainy image to an indisputable fact. I searched online and found the name of the local photographer who had been contracted for the Briar Home graduation ceremony in 2013. He was retired now, living 2 towns over. I called him. I told him I was a Briar Home alumnus, working on a Where Are They Now project. I asked if he still had his outtakes from that night. He laughed. "Young lady, I have boxes of negatives from every job I ever shot." I drove to his house the next day. We spent 2 hours in his dusty attic, sifting through sleeves of negatives, and then we found it. It wasn't a formal shot. It was a backstage candid, taken just before the procession. Janessa was talking to another parent. Her head turned slightly toward the camera. A flash from another parent's camera had gone off at the same moment, and in the photo, the bright light was perfectly reflected in the jewelry she was wearing, a pair of large, lustrous pearl earrings, the exact size, shape, and position as the pale, blurry orbs visible on the figure in my security video. I had her. The video showed her form. The photo showed her jewelry. It was a forensic lock. I scanned the negative and drove back to Riverton. The final piece of my arsenal secured. Janessa had built her entire persona around image, control, and being the center of attention. She craved the spotlight. She manipulated every room so that all eyes were on her. I smiled. She wanted all the light on her. I would give it to her. I would use that very light to burn her empire to the ground. The Oraline Hall was a cathedral of corporate self-congratulation. 3-story-high ceilings dripped with crystal chandeliers, casting a warm, forgiving glow on the several hundred members of Riverton's business elite. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the crowd with trays of champagne and canapes. The air hummed with the sound of forced laughter and discreet deal-making. This was the annual Pierce Logistics Group Charity Gala, the glittering centerpiece of Janessa's social calendar, the one night a year the company pretended to have a soul. Tonight's theme was Building Bridges to the Future, and the beneficiary was a new charity of Janessa's own creation, the North Alder Scholarship Fund. It was a sentimental, calculated nod to the small town where the company was founded, a way for her to publicly claim its history as her own. She was at the center of the room, a goddess in emerald silk, accepting praise and air kisses. Kellen was at her side, her handsome, smiling prince. They were the picture of a corporate dynasty ascendant. My role in this theatrical production had been established a week prior. At a tense planning meeting with the board's executive committee, I had made a suggestion. In light of the recent anonymous regulatory complaints, I had said, my tone carefully neutral, I believe it would be a powerful statement for the gala to open with a short video, not just a highlight reel, but a message reaffirming our unwavering commitment to a culture of integrity. The suggestion hung in the air. It was a challenge she couldn't refuse without looking guilty. To my left, Martha Wellesley, the formidable chair of the audit committee, had nodded slowly. An excellent idea. Ms. Pierce, she'd said, her voice like gravel. A proactive statement on governance is precisely what our shareholders need to see. The motion was approved. I was given control of the gala's opening 3 minutes. Now, I stood in the darkness of the AV booth at the back of the grand ballroom. The control panel in front of me was a sea of glowing buttons and faders. I was not alone. To my right stood Eleanor Vance, my external counsel from Adler, Choi and Fisk, her presence a silent, legal shield. To my left was Martha Wellesley herself, who had excused herself from the head table to ensure the presentation's technical success. She was here as a witness, the embodiment of the board's authority. The house lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. On the two massive screens flanking the stage, the Pierce Logistics logo appeared. Then, it cut to Janessa. It was footage from the culture meeting, professionally edited, her face warm and sincere. Loyalty to this family, her voice boomed through the speakers. Loyalty to our shared mission. The video cut to another clip, from a press interview. Transparency, she was saying, is not a buzzword for us. It is the bedrock of our operations. Then, the music shifted, from an inspiring corporate anthem to a low, dissonant hum. The screen split. On the left, Janessa continued to speak about integrity. On the right, a spreadsheet appeared. It was my rate variance analysis. A red bar graph grew ominously, showing the 26.4% overcharge on the West Sector route. Text appeared below it. Contract 88 to 1A, vendor price variance exceeds benchmark by 40.8 nm. Annually. A confused murmur rippled through the ballroom. This was not the expected highlight reel. On stage, Kellen, who was waiting to be introduced, shifted on his feet. He glanced toward the head table. Janessa's smile was frozen on her face, a rictus of confusion turning to alarm. The video shifted again. Janessa's face disappeared. The screen was now filled with the dry technical interface of our ERP system logs. A cursor highlighted a line of code. Text overlaid the image. System Alert Protocol 7.2. Price deviation. Disabled. 2347. Saturday, 18th May. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. This wasn't just a boring presentation. This felt like an attack. And then came the final layer. The screen went black. For a full 3 seconds, there was only silence. Then, a grainy, black and white image faded in. The high-angle shot of the Briar Home Gym's back canopy. A timestamp in the corner read, June 15, 2013, 21:32:18. Two indistinct figures, one tall in a flowing gown, one shorter with a tight chignon, walked out of the gym. The crowd was utterly baffled. What was this? Old home movie footage? The video froze on that frame. The two figures poised at the edge of the darkness. Then, the screen split again. On the right, the grainy image held. On the left, the freight rate variance chart reappeared. The red bars like bloody fingers pointing at an unnamed crime. The two images, one deeply personal and cryptic, the other clinically corporate and damning, hung there in the silent, cavernous room. A past transgression and a present one, linked by an invisible thread of malice. At the head table, Janessa went rigid, her wine glass, half raised to her lips, stopped dead. Her eyes, wide with a dawning, panicked horror, darted from the screen to the AV booth at the back of the room, a black square of darkness where she knew I was hiding. She was searching for a circuit breaker, a kill switch, a way to stop the broadcast of her own history. But I controlled the feed. I leaned forward and picked up the technician's broadcast microphone. I pressed the button. My voice, calm and amplified, filled every corner of the Oraline Hall. Tonight, we're not just raising funds, I said, my words slicing through the stunned silence. We are reclaiming the truth. All hell broke loose. The murmuring exploded into a roar of confusion and speculation. Kellen, stranded on the stage, looked pale and lost. But before Janessa could rise, before she could scream, another voice cut through the chaos. It was Martha Wellesley, standing beside me, speaking into the same microphone. This program is now suspended, she announced, her voice cracking with an authority that no one in the room dared to challenge. The members of the audit committee will meet with Ms. Pierce and Mr. Pierce in the Oraline conference room, immediately. It was a command. She turned and fixed her gaze on Janessa across the ballroom, the chairwoman of the board and the chairwoman of the audit committee, locked in a silent declaration of war. The walk from the AV booth to the conference room was the longest of my life. The crowd parted before us as if we were lepers, in the small, wood-paneled room adjacent to the ballroom. The other two members of the audit committee were already waiting, their faces grim. Janessa and a terrified-looking Kellen were escorted in by hotel security a moment later. "What is the meaning of this, Martha?" Janessa hissed, her voice shaking with fury. "The meaning, Janessa," Martha replied calmly, "is that we are taking the anonymous regulatory complaint and the evidence presented tonight with the utmost seriousness." "That was not evidence," Janessa spat. "That was a childish, theatrical stunt." "Then you will have no problem reviewing this," I said. I placed a stack of 4 leather-bound binders on the conference table. They were copies of my full report. "One for each of you." Each page of each copy had been numbered by a cryptographic Bates stamp, and in the bottom right corner of every single page, I had placed my own wet ink initials. There would be no pages going missing, no evidence being altered. Eleanor Vance, my lawyer, stepped forward. "My client has compiled a comprehensive report detailing material breaches of fiduciary duty, procurement fraud, and potential conspiracy to defraud the company. You will find it all meticulously documented." The committee members opened their binders. The silence was broken only by the sound of turning pages. For 15 minutes, no one spoke. I watched Janessa's face as the color drained from it, as she saw the spreadsheets, the IP logs, the Gallaport quarry, XLSX ledger, the sworn testimony of Nurse Maria. Finally, Martha Wellesley closed her binder with a soft, final thud. She looked at Janessa, not with anger, but with a kind of weary disgust. "This committee is invoking Bylaw 7, Section 4, she said, her voice flat and formal. "Pending the results of a full, independent investigation, the board hereby suspends you, Janessa Pierce, and you, Kellen Pierce, from all duties, responsibilities, and access to company property, effective immediately." Security stepped forward. Kellen looked like he was going to be sick. Janessa stood, her face a mask of incandescent rage. "You will not get away with this, Rowan," she whispered across the table, her voice a venomous promise. I did not reply. Martha Wellesley stood and walked to the door, then turned back to the rest of us. "The gala is over. The company will be making a formal statement in the morning." She left. The other committee members followed, leaving me, Eleanor, and the 2 suspended executives with the security detail. The coup was complete. It had been bloodless, efficient, and executed entirely according to corporate procedure. The annual shareholder meeting was not held at the Oraline Hall. It was held in the company's own auditorium, a sterile, tiered room with uncomfortable chairs and harsh fluorescent lighting. This was not a place for celebration. It was a place for accountability. The air was thick with tension, a low hum of anxiety from the hundreds of investors, fund managers, and senior employees who had packed the room. They had all read the press releases. They knew the chairwoman and her son had been suspended. They had come for blood. They were not disappointed. Just as the meeting was called to order, the doors at the back of the auditorium opened. Janessa entered. She was not dressed in the soft silks of the gala, but in a severe charcoal gray suit, a piece of corporate armor. At her side was not Kellen, but a man with a shark's smile and reptilian eyes named Harris Shaw, one of the most ruthless litigators in the state. "Point of order, Madam Chairwoman," Shaw boomed, striding down the central aisle as if he owned it. Janessa followed in his wake, her expression one of defiant martyrdom. Martha Wellesley, now acting as interim chair, stood her ground at the podium. "On what grounds, Mr. Shaw?" "On the grounds of illegal suspension and defamation," Shaw announced. "My client, the duly appointed interim chairwoman of this board, has been subjected to a malicious and unsubstantiated character assassination. We are here to demand her immediate, temporary reinstatement, pending the results of the civil suit we will be filing this afternoon." A wave of gasps and whispers washed over the room. Martha's face was a mask of stone. "Your point is noted, Mr. Shaw, and it is denied. Now, if you and your client would please take your seats, we have a presentation from our Director of Compliance." The spotlight swung to me. I walked to the podium. my heels making no sound on the carpeted stage. My heart was a cold, steady drum. I was no longer an auditor, I was a prosecutor. And this was my closing argument. "Good morning," I began, my voice even and clear. "My presentation will last 12 minutes. For the next 12 minutes, I gave them the facts. I put the machine of their conspiracy on display for everyone to see, piece by excruciating piece. Each slide was a clinical exhibit. The Northline rate variance chart, the geolocated IP address from the CFO's forged signature, the P&O box registration for the shell company, J&K Meridian, the falsified expense report from the Director of Procurement, Sam Kaplan. With each new slide, I cited the source, the exhibit number from the Audit Committee's report, and the documented chain of custody. I was not telling a story. I was presenting an unbreakable chain of evidence. I could feel the mood in the room shift, from intrigued to shocked, from shocked to furious. Janessa sat in the front row, her face impassive, but a vein throbbed in her temple. Then, I put up the final slide of my presentation. The grainy, black and white image from the gym security camera. "This last exhibit," I said, "is from a different time. It is presented not as a financial data point, but as a behavioral one. It speaks to a pattern." I finished and returned to my seat. The room was deathly quiet. Martha Wellesley looked to Harris Shaw. "Mr. Shaw, do you have a response to the data presented by Ms. Pierce?" Shaw rose, his smile wider than ever. He had been waiting for this. He saw the grainy video as his opening. "A response? Madam Chairwoman, I hardly think a response is necessary. The first 11 minutes of Ms. Pierce's presentation were a masterclass in taking unrelated data points and weaving them into a paranoid fantasy, but that last minute, that was the key." He turned to the audience. "She wants you to believe that this collection of amorphous blobs from a 12-year-old security tape has some bearing on this company's Q3 earnings report. She is asking you, the shareholders, to make a financial decision based on a child's melodrama. We can't even tell who those figures are. For all we know, it's a photograph of two ghosts." He had made his fatal error. He had attacked the one piece of evidence that was, until this moment, purely personal. He had given me permission to make it relevant. I stood and addressed Martha. "Madam Chairwoman, may I respond to counsel's assertion regarding the inability to determine identity and the subject of silencing others?" Martha nodded. "Proceed, Ms. Pierce." I looked to the AV technician in the back. "Next slide, please." A new image appeared on the screen. It was not a video, it was a screenshot of an email. From jpierce@piercelogistics.com to kpierce@piercelogistics.com. Subject: the new director. The date was from my first week at the company, and the body of the email contained a single, chilling sentence. It read, "She is a problem, but we have handled problems before. Remember graduation night? That was the night I taught you the most important lesson of all, how to silence someone who is taking up too much light." A collective gasp went through the auditorium. It was a confession, written in her own words. It tied the slap to a philosophy, a business practice. Harris Shaw's jaw went slack. Janessa shot to her feet. "This is a fabrication, an outrage." "Is it?" I asked, my voice cutting through hers. "Then perhaps you can explain the attachment. Next slide." The screen changed again. It split into two images. On the left was the enhanced security still from the 42nd floor, the night the ERP system was sabotaged. The glint of the thick gold cuff bracelet on the shadowy figure's wrist was clearly visible. On the right was a high-resolution press photo from a charity event last year. Janessa was laughing, her left hand raised, the exact same gold cuff gleaming on her wrist. The match was undeniable. She was there. She had silenced the system alarms just as she had silenced me. Before Shaw could object, before Janessa could scream again, Martha Wellesley stood up, holding a single sheet of paper. "The Audit Committee," she announced, her voice resonating with a newfound, iron authority. has one final piece of evidence to present. This was found in Grant Pierce's personal safe at the office, in a sealed envelope addressed to me. She put on her reading glasses. It is a handwritten letter, dated the day before he took his medical leave. She began to read. "Martha," she began, her voice softening as she read my father's words. "My health is failing. My memory is unreliable. Janessa is making all of my arrangements. I am no longer certain of what is real. But there is one thing I am still sure of. If I am silenced, trust Rowan. She has always been the true one. She has my proxy. She has my voice." The letter was a torpedo that ripped through the hull of Janessa's defense. It was my father, speaking from his prison, appointing me his champion. The room was in an uproar. Shareholders were shouting. The board members on stage were in a heated, whispered conference. I walked from my seat to the aisle, where a floor microphone stood on a stand. I picked it up. All eyes turned to me. The room fell silent. I looked directly at Janessa. My voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I don't want your chair," I said. "I never did." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I want the voice of the man who taught me to do what is right." It was over. A motion was made from the floor by a major institutional investor to hold an emergency vote. It was seconded by a dozen voices at once. The resolution was simple: a vote of no confidence, a permanent removal of Janessa Pierce and Kellen Pierce from the board and from any and all positions within the company, a formal referral of the Audit Committee's full report to the District Attorney's Office and the SEC. The vote was a sea of raised hands. It was nearly unanimous. "The motion carries," Martha declared, her voice ringing with finality. "Security, please escort Ms. Pierce from the auditorium." 2 uniformed guards approached the front row. Janessa stood slowly, her face a pale mask of fury. She did not look at me. She turned, and with a ramrod straight back, walked up the aisle. Her heels struck the polished concrete floor with a series of sharp, violent clicks. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. It was the sound of her 4-beat rhythm of rage, a sound that had once terrified me, now echoing her defeat. I did not watch her go. My eyes were fixed on the large monitor to the side of the stage. On it, via a live video link from Halverton Pines, was my father. The court had granted our petition. His medication had been changed. The fog was beginning to lift. He was sitting up in his chair, watching the proceedings. He looked frail, but his eyes were clear. He looked at me through the screen. And then, very slowly, he nodded. The chaos of the shareholder meeting dissolved with bureaucratic efficiency. In the aftermath, there was no celebration, only a quiet, methodical cleansing. The Audit Committee, with Martha Wellesley now firmly at the helm, moved with the speed of a battlefield triage unit. An independent, external CEO, a stoic, gray-haired corporate turnaround specialist, was appointed by mid-afternoon. His first official act was to sign the letter authorizing a full independent medical evaluation for my father, to be conducted by 2 of the top neurologists from Riverton University Hospital, doctors with no ties to the Pierce family, its trusts, or its tragedies. The machine of corporate governance, once jammed and corrupted, was slowly beginning to grind its way back toward true north. I did not stay to watch it. My purpose here was complete. That same afternoon, I walked into Sarah Jenkins' office, the head of HR, and placed a single, sealed envelope on her desk. It was my letter of resignation, effective immediately. Beside it, I placed a slim encrypted hard drive. "My full handover report," I said. "Every file from my compliance audit is on there, indexed and cross-referenced. All my work product now belongs to the company." Sarah, the woman who had passed me the fearful, life-changing sticky note, looked up from the letter. There were no tears in her eyes, but there was a profound, weary relief. She reached across the desk and took my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Thank you," she said, her voice low and steady. "Not for the drama, not for the victory. Thank you for doing it by the book, for following the process. I nodded. It was the highest compliment she could give. I had used the system's own rules to purge the corruption. I had not been a vigilante. I had been a function of the law. I left her office and took the elevator down not to the garage, but to the main lobby. The vast, marble-floored expanse was quiet now. The lunchtime rush long over, I walked to the long, granite reception desk. The receptionist looked up, startled, as I placed the small, brushed metal box on the counter, the box that had been my secret, my weapon, my entire history for 12 years. With steady fingers, I spun the dials for the last time. 615. The lock clicked open. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay the tiny micro-SD card. My first piece of evidence, the ghost of a girl with a bloody lip. I picked it up between my thumb and forefinger. For a moment, I just looked at it, this tiny black square that had held so much weight. Then, with a single, sharp application of pressure, I snapped it in two. The plastic cracked with a faint, dry click. I let the two useless pieces fall back into the box, then closed the lid and pushed it across the counter toward the bewildered receptionist. "Please dispose of this," I said. It was no longer my evidence to keep. The truth did not belong to me anymore. It belonged to the company's archives, to the court dockets, to the public record. Its power was no longer in its secrecy, but in its disclosure. My personal injury had been fully converted into a corporate and legal fact. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was him. I answered. His voice was raspy, still weak, but it was his. The fog was lifting. There were no pleasantries, no preamble, just 5 words, delivered with the finality of a verdict. "I heard the vote," my father said. I stopped in the middle of the lobby, the phone pressed to my ear. I looked at my own faint reflection in the polished marble floor. "We are done," I replied. A long silence. Then, a soft click as he ended the call. We were done. I walked to the bank of elevators and pressed the button for the ground floor. The polished steel doors slid open and I stepped inside. As they began to close, they created a perfect mirror. I saw my reflection coming toward me, a woman of 32, her face pale and tired, but whole, unmarked, the ghost of the girl from graduation night. The girl with the swollen cheek and the taste of blood in her mouth was gone. The doors sealed me in darkness for a moment, then opened again into the main lobby. Near the main entrance, 2 maintenance workers were on a scaffold. Peeling away an old, faded poster of a smiling truck driver, they were replacing it with a new one. The design was minimalist, just white text on a deep blue background. It was a new slogan, a new mission statement for the company I was leaving behind. It read, "Integrity is how we ship." I walked past them, through the revolving glass doors, and out onto the street. The autumn air hit my face, sharp and cold. It carried the smell of the Riverton River and the distant scent of rain. I took a deep breath. The air was clean. The end. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me. I'd love to see where you all are listening from. So please drop a comment below, and let's connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. And to help this story reach even more people, please support it by hitting that hype button. Your support makes all the difference.